Hey, City Life. On the traditional church calendar for Holy Week, Tuesday is a reflection on Jesus' predictions of his death in John 12 and in John 13. Now, Jesus predicts his death multiple times in the Gospels. But before we get to the Gospels, it was said in perhaps the greatest movie of all time, Gladiator, that death smiles on us all, and all that man can do is smile back. We've long lived in a culture that's immersed in death. We watch documentaries about serial killers. We play video games where we kill and murder. We watch movies filled with guns and violence. But here's the catch, right? Here's our limit. We much prefer to keep any consideration of death on the other side of a screen. We get uncomfortable when death smiles on us, right? When death gets personal, when death pulls up close and reminds us of its presence. For many of us, that's what the past weeks and the spread of the coronavirus, it's what it's done, right? We're forced to reflect on our mortality. There's no longer 2 degrees of separation for many of us. At this point, many of us know somebody. Many of us know someone who's been affected in some way by the spread of this virus. But I tell you that this reminder we've been walking in of the reality of death, not a bad thing to chew away or chase away. It can be a grace and it can be a mercy, because death it's detox. Our culture numbs us with this illusion of control that we're masters of our fate. And as a result, we put off any thought of death. As a result, we put off any thought of our mortality or eternity. But death is detox. And it forces us to pause and reflect like few other things can. That's why Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 2, it's better to spend your time at funerals than at parties. After all, everyone dies, so the living should take this to heart. That's why Moses wrote in Psalm 90, verse 12, teach us to realize the brevity of life so that we may grow in wisdom. Death is detox, right? Death makes us appreciate life, and death makes us consider eternal life. It's one reason that Jesus talked about death a lot, and not just death in general, his death. He predicted his death multiple times in the Gospels, and in John 12, Jesus does just that. I want to read from verse 23 in John 12. He says, now is the time for the Son of Man to enter into his glory. I tell you the truth, unless a kernel of wheat is planted in the soil and dies, it remains alone. But its death will produce many new kernels, a plentiful harvest of new lives. Those who love their life in this world will lose it. Those who care nothing for their life in this world will keep it for eternity. Anyone who wants to be my disciple must follow me, because my servants must be where I am, and the Father will honor anyone who serves me. Now my soul is deeply troubled. Should I pray, Father, save me from this hour? But this is the very reason I came. Father, bring glory to your name. See, Jesus predicts his death in John 12, verse 23 and beyond. He does it again in John 13. That in itself wouldn't be all that remarkable. But it goes beyond just his death. Jesus predicts his resurrection. Matter of fact, you see, whenever Jesus gets to talking about going to the cross and death, he also talks about his resurrection. In John 12, here he references his glory, references his glorification. Jesus is proclaiming for all that will hear it, hey, death is not the final destination. It's a fleeting detour. You see, we so often see life as beginning at birth, which we can't remember, and ending at death, which we can't imagine. But Jesus spoke frequently of his role before birth. He speaks of his role after death, and the years on earth as some kind of like time of transition. And that perspective, it changes everything. It introduces eternity. It introduces eternal life into the equation. Again, our culture tries to find peace amidst death by distancing ourselves from it and the thought of it. But true hope is found in drawing near to God, because that's eternal life. Not something found after death, but something we can find right now. In John 17:3, Jesus says, this is the way to have eternal life, to know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, the one you sent to earth. Now that relationship can start now. And that means eternal life can start now. And death is no longer an ominous period or a last page waiting at the end of our story. As Dietrich Bonhoeffer once put it, as he was awaiting his own execution, death is the supreme festival on the road to freedom. Death isn't the final destination. It's a brief detour. It's a tunnel as we die and then rise. I'll never forget a conversation I had with a waitress at Mango Mango in Phoebus. She had moved to Virginia Beach from Dallas and had been working at the restaurant for a month. And every day, right, she's commuting on 64, going through the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. But here's what we quickly found out in our conversation with her. She had no idea that she was going underwater. You could see the wheels turning in her head as she thought about her commute and driving in her car with this not so blank stare. And then you could see the instant that her mind was blown. She had been totally unaware of the ocean on the other side of those tunnel walls. Yet the next day, I'd bet she didn't slam on her brakes before the tunnel, as way too many people are prone to do. Why? Because she knew for certain that there was light on the other side. Right? It had been done before. She'd done it before. And there's life on the other side. See, Christ predicts, promises, and then proves that there's life on the other side. He predicts his death multiple times. And he promises life on the other side, not just for him, but for us. Not because he was fascinated by death, but because he was pointing to eternal life. See, death will smile on us all. And we're able to smile back. And then we're able to lift our eyes to Jesus, who didn't just predict his death, he beat death. And he blazed a path of resurrection and eternal life for you and me. And that eternal life, that relationship with Jesus that transcends death, it starts now. So may you step into and walk in relationship with Jesus this week, Easter weekend, the weeks and years to come, and in the eternal life to come that beats and goes beyond death. God bless.